Hello everyone, I hope you guys are all well. Just going to give good old Facebook a couple of seconds just to catch up with the live so that I don't end up talking over myself. Just to make sure that I'm coming through nice and clear. Hello everyone who's signing on. Everyone hear me okay? Hopefully the connection is all good. So welcome to morning Jenny, hope you're well. Morning, Mum. So welcome to day 4 of the Ayurvedic Contentment Challenge. Hooning through all the content now. Morning, Marcia. Thank you all for joining me this afternoon. Morning, Carol. Tracy, hello. Yesterday was a really important one for me. I really enjoyed the concept of silence. Like I said yesterday, is a really important one for me. I think it's something that's so lacking and so absent from the way, the craziness of Western life. And I think proactively engaging and protecting silence in our day, every day, is right up there with eating a good diet and getting the right amount of sleep and this, that, and the other. And I think it was really interesting to read all of your comments about quite a lot of you actually. We've had loads of comments about people who've tried to proactively protect silence into their day yesterday, and also hopefully today, with just you're listening to the rain or driving to work in silence rather than the radio. Loads of different examples, but it seems like all of you have found it to be a pretty powerful approach, which is brilliant, because like I said yesterday, the published evidence supports why it's so powerful with regards to our mental health and our contentment, etc., etc. So and it even allows us to turn a bit of a negative into a positive, which is I guess the theme for today. But like the rain, it's been pouring down here all night and morning, and even listening to the rain, there's such clear evidence that the sound of rain, is one of the most relaxing sounds that the human brain recognizes. If you can chill out with a cup of tea, listen to the rain just for 10-15 minutes of silence, the impact upon our emotional health, our feel-good hormones, is just really profound. So it's an important one for sure. So today I want to talk about the next contentment ritual, the ritual we're aiming to embed tomorrow. Today is about silence in terms of getting it into our day. Tomorrow's contentment ritual is all about gratitude, but more powerfully, more specific than just kind of your bog standard.
Hi all, just walking past, so I thought I'd say hi.
Holly's on sourdough. What is it? It's pain, isn't it?
Hats off to anyone who makes sourdough. It's beating me, but anyway, I'll keep trying.
It's worth it. The silence practice has felt really special. Listen to the rain too, and then the seagulls joined in. Yeah, I think there's no coincidence. I suppose you look at every spiritual practice, every religion, whether that's God or whether it's something else, whether it's nature, whether it's a religion, whether it's just a spiritual view. Silence is an integral part of that, and it's missing. So most people do find it to be pretty profound. So I'm pleased you found it helpful, Lynn. So I want to talk about gratitude, but gratitude's getting a lot of headlines, in popular media, in the medical research. But I want to delve into it in a little bit more detail than just kind of positive thinking. There's a lot more to it to that. But cultivating gratitude is a learned skill. It's something that we learn, it's something we practice, it's something we cultivate. And if we do that, the evidence around what it does to our mental health, our contentment levels, our happiness, our peace, our joy is, right up there with some of the most powerful, interventions of any of them, which is why, what I want to talk about is approaching it from the Ayurvedic and yogic perspective. Contentment and gratitude has nothing to do with what is going on outside of us. It is completely independent of what is going on outside. The house we own, the car we drive, our level of health, our level of money or lack of, whatever. We can cultivate gratitude and we can cultivate contentment irrespective of our situation. And that's why at the end of the talk, I want to speak about my experience with Nick, which you would have got in the email this morning. He was a terminal cancer patient. We had the privilege of meeting when we were working at Crawley Hospital. And he was a living embodiment of everything we're going to talk about today. And the reason he's so important is that if someone who's been given at best months, but probably weeks to live, can cultivate a level of contentment that, in his own words, were higher than most of his previous decades of life when he was well, it was a real eye-opener for me of all this theory and science, of Ayurveda and yoga that's being preached for 5,000 years. I've never seen it work in such a dire, kind of hopeless and acute situation. That's why I want to elaborate on that. But I just want to talk very quickly about how to grasp gratitude, by the horns, so to speak, and I want to just contextualize it almost neurologically, okay? Because there's a lot of understanding and a lot of frustration around why gratitude practices don't often work, okay? And if we can explain that and reperceive it, it suddenly becomes a lot clearer and a lot easier. And when we're talking about gratitude, when we're talking about why there's such a high level of discontent in the Western world, we have to approach that almost from an evolutionary perspective, which sounds a bit abstract, but it will make sense. Because we owe our survival, the sheer success of our species, our evolution since Homo sapiens, since we stood up and we crossbred with Neanderthals and all the rest of it, we owe our prolific progression and survival down to a series of genes in our body which are always seeking more. It's a series of survival mechanisms that every animal has, but we've got the powerful brain to mobilize it in a way that most animals don't. And that survival mechanism is cultivated by a desire to always seek more, to always want more. Because obviously, when we were hunter-gatherers, when we had less security, a lot of the time we had deprivation. And the way to protect against deprivation was to have more. So if we were hunter-gatherers and we had food for a day, we wanted to learn how could we protect food for a week. And once we'd learned how to preserve food, and we had food for a week, and we realized how much easier it made life, we said, okay, well, how can we learn to protect food supplies for a month? And then we learned more skills. We learned smoking and we learned drying. And then once we learned how to protect food supplies for a month, it was, well, imagine how easy life would be and how much less stressful life would be if we could protect and preserve food stocks for a year. And that then led to the first seeds of agriculture in the Stone Age, where people, rather than moving around, settled and started growing food because it gave them more food with less work. And that survival mechanism, those genes, unfortunately, they served us so well back then, but they're a huge disservice to us now, because those survival genes, which are always seeking more, are just as active in our body now as they were back then. And what's the upshot of that? The upshot of that is we're still always seeking more. If we're getting around on foot perfectly well, we often want a bike because it's quicker. And if we've got a bike, we want a car because it's easier. And if we can then got a car, we want a luxury car because it's nicer. And if we've got a luxury car, we want a chauffeur-driven car because we haven't got to drive. And then if we can afford a chauffeur-driven car, we want a private jet. We're always seeking more. And if we're on 30 grand a year, we want to earn 50 grand a year. And if we're on 50 grand a year, we want 100 grand a year. And it's not our fault. It's the way our brain and our genes are programmed to ensure our survival. It's that survival seeking more to ensure our survival as such. And it's not our fault. It's the way we're programmed the way we're kind of programmed to exist and programmed to thrive. But obviously that doesn't serve us now. Because and there's a huge amount of neurological research into this, psycho-neurological, neuropsychiatry research into this why this is so damaging. Because often it's at the subconscious level. We don't know that we're always seeking more. We don't know we're always leading and driving and pushing for more. Often it's subconscious. And what's the upshot of that? What does the research show is the upshot of that? The research shows that so much of the rampant discontent and unhappiness and depression that is endemic in Western cultures, that interestingly aren't so endemic in Eastern cultures, are because of these genes that are always seeking more. It's now linked to the high levels of depression, the high levels of anxiety, the high levels of discontent, the restlessness, the chronic disillusionment with life, envy, jealousy, feeling hard done by, all of these traits that are so common in our society that often, like I said, aren't aren't our fault because of the way we're programmed. But the crux of the matter, and this is where the Ayurvedic approach becomes so important, is that if we're living a pretty comfortable life, and by that I mean we've got a roof over our head, a safe house, enough food and enough water to drink, our rational head, we often give ourselves a real telling to, a real kind of talking to, a bit of a telling off. Yeah, how dare I feel envious of my neighbour because they've got a bigger house or a bigger car, or how envious because I've just found out my cousin's kids are going to an exclusive private school, or how bad is it of me to want more when I've got so much. We realise at the conscious level that we're being, not ungrateful, but it's wrong of us to seek more when we've got so much. But the crux of the matter is that we can't tell ourselves to not feel a certain way. This is the crux of the neurological science of gratitude. We can't tell the brain to not feel a certain way. So if you're saying to yourself, I hate, everyone's been there. Someone's got something that we really want, or someone's achieving something that we're not. The envy is, there's always a degree of envy, I think. And if we tell ourselves, I'm not going to feel envious of Joe Blogs, I'm not going to feel this way, I'm not going to feel, just pick envy just as an individual example. If we're saying to ourselves, I'm not going to feel envious, I'm not going to let this negative emotion rule me, the brain doesn't hear any of that. All the brain hears at the neurological level is envy. So you're saying, or I'm saying to myself, I'm not going to feel envious, or I'm not going to feel depressed, or I'm not going to feel sad. All the brain hears is envy or sad or wanting more. That's all it hears. And the best illustration of that is if everyone listening now shuts your eyes. If you shut your eyes just for a couple of seconds, right? Shut your eyes right now. And whatever you do for the next 5 seconds, I don't want you to think or imagine a bright pink elephant. Okay, whatever you do, don't think about a bright pink elephant. Don't imagine or visualize a bright pink elephant. Okay, and I bet you every single one of you listening would be thinking, or if you shut your eyes, would be kind of imagining a bright pink elephant. Okay, because if you're saying to your brain, don't think about a bright pink elephant, all the brain sees and hears is a bright pink elephant. So your brain thinks it. So if we're saying, I won't feel envious, I won't feel discontented, all the brain hears is envy and discontent. So it becomes more of an established emotion, okay? So the way of blocking that is not to think, is to not think about it, it's to give it an alternative. So if I said to you, shut your eyes, and whatever you do, I don't want you to think about a bright pink elephant. And I'm going to stop you thinking about that by thinking about a monkey, okay? And if you do that, if you think of a monkey, it's going to stop you thinking about a bright pink elephant. Well, this is all a bit weird and abstract, but you can't tell your brain to not think about something. You have to give it an alternative option. And I've done this in big groups, kind of like 100 people. And most people, if they're not trying to think about a pink elephant, will think about a pink elephant. But if you get them to think about a monkey, most of them can have no thought about an elephant. Okay, either straight off the bat or as a learned skill, you can learn to block the thought you don't want with a thought by thinking of something you do want. And the monkey in this example is gratitude. Okay, gratitude, by consciously and proactively engaging in gratitude, we give the mind and the brain an alternative option to think about, okay? And the beauty, the absolute power of this approach is that it doesn't matter if we're a king or a pauper, if we're rich or we're poor, if we're sick or we're healthy, we don't need to change the context of our life or our situation or our station or what we've got or what we haven't got to induce contentment. We just need to change our perception of what we've got, and there's MRI work, there's neurological research to show that we can change our happiness by looking at what we have got rather than looking at what we haven't got. And that's what swastika is. What is swastika? We spoke about swastika right at the start of the series. Swastika is the ability to progress through life feeling settled in our body, settled in our mind, settled in our situation. Okay, and what is that? That's this. It's looking at what we have got. It's cultivating contentment with where we are rather than where we're always seeking to be. And what does the science say about this? And I did a post on the Facebook group yesterday, which some of you may have seen. The science says a lot about it. The clinical neurological research says a lot about this. And what the research shows is that if you take a group of people, okay, who are happily going through life, some unhappy, some happy, some discontented, some contented, the full spectrum, and you teach them specific gratitude practices, within about 4 to 6 weeks, the people who are practicing gratitude in a conscious and proactive way experience within about 6 weeks a 25% improve, between 25 and 30% increase in their levels of happiness and contentment as assessed by the most rigorous psychological individualized analysis. Okay, so you think about the significance of that. All they haven't changed their job, they haven't got more money, they haven't got a new partner, nothing has changed in their life from day 1 of the experiment to day at the end of week 6 of the experiment. Nothing has changed. All they've changed is that they've changed their thought process to focus on what they have got. And through doing that, their levels of happiness, their contentment, their hormone profiles, their blood work, they are walking around in the body that's 25% happier through changing nothing in their life, just changing their perception. And the one thing that I really emphasize about that kind of research is that these people are gaining a 25% improvement with one variable. All they did was focus on gratitude. But if you imagine they focused on gratitude and they added in herbal support, they supported their gut health, they engaged in silence, they practiced pranayama, they used more nature immersion, 101, all the things we've been speaking about and lots of other things, you can suddenly see if they get 25% improvement from one practice, if you start adding in 3, 4, 5 practices a day, which is the whole aim of this challenge, suddenly you can be walking around in the body that's 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% happier through nothing changing. Nothing outside of your body and your mind and your brain has changed other than what you're doing to support it, what you're doing to enhance it, how you're changing your outlook and your focus. You don't need to change the outside world to become happier and more contented. You need to change the way you perceive the outside world. And that's something that the Vedic philosophy and the Vedic psychology and spirituality and also Ayurvedic medicine, that's a key roadmap to swastika. It's this idea of we need to learn how to change our perceptions. And that's why I want to talk about, I've got quite a few questions popping up. We had this in NLP, exactly. The brain can't understand words like no, don't. You have to give the brain what it does want, exactly that's. EFT, exactly the same. All these things are coming from the same process. So it's just some are more Western, some are more Eastern, but they're all working on the same way. And the real strength of this approach is, which I wasn't going to talk about actually, but that just reminded me, was something called neuroplasticity. Some of you may have heard of a term called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is a new whole framework and paradigm in neurology. And it's based on the idea that we can change the structure of our brain. We can change this, we can physically, on an MRI, we can restructure our brain based upon the thoughts we cultivate. And the neural networks of the brain change within about 6 to 8 weeks. So if we're cultivating gratitude, contentment, swastika through changing our outlook, and if you did an MRI at the start and at the end, you can see that the brain has restructured itself to make contentment a default setting in our life. So we're actually changing our brain at the structural level to make ourselves more contented. Nothing is changing other than our outlook. Exactly, Adrian, where attention goes, energy grows. It's exactly that. That's all this is. And the reason I remember we did a talk at this to a group of GPs when I was working at the hospital. And there was some of the most consistent questions or comments we got about this was, that's all well and good when things are going well, but it's a load of rubbish when we're facing really dire situations. When we're facing situations that are really at the absolute pinnacle of challenge and stress and threat, this concept goes out of the window. How can you focus on the glass being half full when someone's died or you're dying or this, that, and the other is happening? And the Vedic answer to that is it doesn't matter what situation you're facing, you always have a choice at how you cultivate your response to that. And there's 2 things that prove that, I think, in the most abject way. The first one, which I don't want to talk about too much on because I've spoken about it before in lots of different ways, is the Holocaust. If anyone's read Viktor Frankl's work, from Auschwitz and Belsen and whatnot, in what is probably the most abject provocation a human's ever experienced in the Holocaust, in the concentration camps. Viktor Frankl was a psychoanalyst. He had this very, very powerful framework of mind control, and he was able to reperceive his situation in the extremity of that deprivation to induce contentment and to induce happiness, or a degree of happiness and peace in that situation by every day focusing on what he did have. Okay, he was freezing cold because he only had one single shirt to wear in the middle of a Polish winter, but that's better than no shirt. Or a load of his friends being sent to the gas chambers, he hadn't been sent, so that was a bonus that day. Every day, him and his group cultivated this changing outlook, and if they can do it in that situation, I'm convinced anyone can do it. But what really brought it home to me was this man that Holly and I both met actually when we were working at Crawley Hospital running survivorship courses for cancer patients. And Nick was a 37-year-old guy, had 2 young boys, was diagnosed with something called CUP, which is cancer of unknown primary. So it was all over his body, it was in his brain, it was in his spine, it was in his liver. They didn't know where the cancer came from. They didn't know what the actual cancer was because they couldn't find the primary. Because they couldn't find the primary, it's very hard to target the treatment, and because they couldn't target the treatment, the outcome is very, very bad. So he was given a very, very bad prognosis. He was given about 6 to 8 weeks at the point that we met him. And he actually went on a lot longer than that. He survived for about 7 months from that point, which is phenomenal in its own right. But the reason Nick had such an impact upon me was because he ran his own business. He was in the pub trade. He had a huge amount of stress. And he said prior to his diagnosis, his life was governed by rushing, work, money, what he hasn't got, always looking for more, like it is for a lot of us. But once that he got that prognosis, he learned to see the beauty in every single facet of life. He got to see just going out to buy milk or bread from the shop, being able to put on your shoes, walk out the front door, walk along the street. Is it raining? Is it sunny? Hear the birds singing, feel the sun on your face. Because mortality homes in at kind of our outlook, and listening to him, we worked with him intensely for 8 or 9 weeks, and looking at the way his mindset shifted and developed and progressed over that period of time was like it was a metamorphosis. I've never seen a transformation like it, because he saw the good, he saw the gratitude in every single thing. Even when his younger child was waking up in the night and he had to get up at 3 in the morning because he wanted to, because he didn't know how long he was going to be able to, that was a privilege, to be able to tuck your child in at 2 in the morning. So many parents, ourselves included, you get up, you're tired, you're frustrated, you want to get the child back to sleep so you can go to bed as quickly as possible. He was like, well, there's a real opportunity here. What a privilege to be able to go to my son, sing him a little song, tuck him into bed and cuddle him. If that's threatening to be taken away from you in 8 weeks, that becomes the most priceless thing in the world. And he had the ability to cultivate this contentment in everything, this gratitude in everything. And what he said something to me towards the end, which I'll never forget, which was, he said, the level of contentment and happiness and joy I've experienced in the last few months have been higher than I've ever experienced since being an independent adult. And the beauty of that was that's facing the most horrific, crisis that we could probably experience. The fact that, we've got a very, very short period of life left, and what he learned and what he taught. And one of the things that we're hell-bent on propagating is that our contentment has nothing to do with what is going on outside. It's how we choose to interpret the world around us. And the reason Nick was so important for me was because if he could cultivate that level of contentment, that level of swastika in that kind of crisis, anyone who's not facing that kind of crisis has a more powerful capacity to do it, because they're facing less of an imbalance. And it's one of the real takeaway messages from this week for me is, if we change our perceptions, we change our reality. And if those perceptions are gratitude focused we will become more gracious, and with the more gracious, we have more contentment. The evidence is absolutely clear around that. And in the so the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu's book, I've got that book, Joy. That's a fantastic read around how we can create joy and contentment in our life through changing our perceptions. All of the Dalai Lama's books are really, really good. So we must never be complacent. Exactly that. And I think it's about being grateful. And there's so many books and very good books and so many approaches around how we can practice gratitude. But some of them are backed in neuroscience, and some of them are just random. And in the email today, I've sent 3 gratitude practices. Okay. We picked those 3 because they're the ones that have been used most heavily in the actual research, in terms of how do we help people re-perceive themselves in a way that's looking at what I have got, how lucky I am, rather than what I haven't got and how unlucky I am. Okay. And I think the power of the gratitude practices, I know it sounds commonsensical and pretty stupid, but it's actually doing them. Okay, because what a lot of people do, and myself included actually, I remember doing this years ago, I'm reading about this and thinking how amazing it is, but not actually sitting down and doing it. So the challenge tomorrow, the contentment challenge for you tomorrow or today, if you've got the time, is to look at those 3 gratitude practices and pick one, and actually sit down with a pad or a journal and a pen and actually do 1 or 2 or even 3 of them, whatever you want to do. But actually do it, actually physically do that act, because it changed. So it changed everything. So one in the email I put about one of the ones that I did was I had this. You have some days where everything goes right, and I had this amazing day out with my son up in the South Downs doing downhill mountain biking, and it was just one of those days where the weather was beautiful, the scenery was beautiful, it was frosty, we had a great day, beautiful picnic, kind of packed lunch, and I got home, my mind was kind of overflowing with this. What a day, and just by writing that down on just one page of A4, it took the joy and it just exploded it into a higher level. And they're the kind of things that are in that those gratitude practices. And Holly has just posted up the link. But I'd really Sue. I first met Sam at the Olive Tree in the cancer program. Oh wow, that's a blast from the past. So that's where I met Nick, Sue. That was at the cancer program at Olive Tree at Crawley Hospital. A profound day for me that changed my life. Well, that makes me very happy to read that, Sue. And I hope you're well. I hope you're doing really well. That's what a privilege to read that. Thank you. So the challenge for you today or tomorrow is to actually look at those gratitude practices, but actually do it. Actually just commit, I'm going to sit down with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee for 5 or 10 minutes and I'm going to do one of those practices. And what the research shows is we don't need to do it that often. Once or twice a week even once a week is enough to change our outlook, to change brain function in a way that makes gratitude our default setting. And I guarantee you, with a 99.9% certainty, that if gratitude is our default setting, contentment will soar. You can't be gracious, you can't be full of gratitude and discontent. They're mutually exclusive. So if we can make gratitude our outlook, our levels of swastika, our levels of contentment, they just soar to a higher level. And again, the ashram culture, one of the key reasons that ashrams in India and Sri Lanka developed was the nature immersion and the silence, like I spoke about yesterday. But it was about focusing on key activities like non-judgment, like gratitude, like this refocusing of where we're at and what we've got. And we can recreate that. In our life now. Okay, so I really, I can kind of beg you to actually engage in those practices, because they are transformative, and I think they're almost more important now than they were 30 or 40 years ago, because there's such rampant commercialism in the West, there's such rampant materialism, and the advertising industry is so powerful, both consciously and subconsciously. A lot of the time it's subliminal. We're having it rammed down our throat. Always, we want more. Just look at the national lottery. It's telling you that it will give you happiness. It's telling you that it will give you this house and this super yacht and this everything else. And it's almost like, well, unless we've got that, we're not going to be happy. And it's about kind of reperceiving our framework of, I don't need any of this to be content and happy. That's the cherry on the cake. The cake is myself. The cake is what is within me. And I always have the power to be content and happy and grateful from within, irrespective of what is without. And that's why people like Nick, people like Viktor Frankl, all of the Holocaust research, that's what they advocate, that's what they show, and that's what they prove. Because if they can do it, and actually just one very other quick example, we did a research project at Southampton interviewing parents who'd lost children under 10 years of age to cancer, which to my mind as a parent is probably the most horrific thing I can imagine, or probably anyone can imagine. And even in the face of that, some of these mums and dads were able to, they were obviously grieving, they were obviously in a level of pain that is unimaginable, but even in the face of that, they were able to cultivate what they did have. They did have 4 years with their son or daughter. They did have these amazing memories, and they held on to that, and they used it to catapult better things, charities and fundraising and this, that, and the other. So it didn't dissolve the pain. It didn't remove the grief. In some ways, it maybe enhanced it, but it gave them an outlook that gave them the strength to go forward. And what more can anyone ask for, I suppose? So it really is powerful. So I'll stop waffling there, but the challenge tomorrow, like I said, is to try and embed those gratitude practices, have a go with those gratitude practices. So Julie, just before sleep, to go to sleep in that state of gratitude is incredibly powerful. It's nice to do it last thing at the night before bed. That's really, really powerful. So that's really, really key. Okay. So other than that, so tomorrow we've got quite a lot happening tomorrow. We're back on. We've got a super very, very exciting special announcement tomorrow during our 12 o'clock video tomorrow. So we're back on at 12 tomorrow for our special announcement. Super excited about that. It's kind of the pinnacle of our work at the moment. And then we're back tomorrow evening for the bonus Mama therapy session. Mama therapy is kind of like Ayurvedic acupressure, and you can use it for every single problem in the body. It's also very, very good for mood and stress and contentment. So we'll be talking about what Mama therapy is, how to use it at home, where the Mama points are on the body. So hopefully I'll see you at 12 tomorrow for some super exciting news. And I'll see you at, I think it's at 7, Holly, 7:30. Tomorrow we'll confirm in the email tomorrow, but we'll be doing a bonus session on Friday evening. And we've also got a few extra key bonus things coming up after this weekend. We're going to do some foraging stuff and some medicine making and whatnot. So we've got lots of stuff coming up. But thank you so much for all your keep the comments coming, keep the posts coming, keep the photos coming. Let's keep the energy in the group super high. The level of community, the level of engagement in this group has been the best we've ever had by a long way. You guys are just absolutely smashing it in terms of your engagement and your commitment, and it's we're so grateful for that. So keep that energy high. Let's transform our mindset. Let's transform our contentment, and let's keep going. So have a lovely rest of the day, and I'll see you all at 12 o'clock tomorrow for a special announcement. Take care, everyone.